During my son's burial, I saw my daughter-in-law smiling at a stranger. Minutes later, I found out why. My name is Robert Hayes. I am 58 years old. I have hands that know how to fix things, a voice that has calmed storms in my family, and a heart that has learned to hold pain quietly. I live in a small house with a porch that faces a maple tree. For as long as I can remember, my son Jason and I fixed things together under that tree. He would hold the flashlight while I worked. He would laugh at the wrong jokes and call me old man when I forgot where I put a wrench. He was my boy. On a cold Sunday in late October, we buried him. We had been at the cemetery for only a little while. People said words, hugged, wiped tears. The priest read a short, plain prayer because Jason would have hated a lot of fuss. The casket was heavy and dark. We lowered it into the ground like we were setting down a lamp that used to light our house and now would not be turned on again. I stood to the left of the grave. My knees felt like they belonged to somebody else. I had Jason's picture pinned on my chest. The photo showed him smiling, the smile that made his eyes disappear into little crescents. The sky was gray, but the leafless trees looked like old hands folded in prayer. Emily stood on the other side of the grave. She is 29, pretty in a plain way, with brown hair worn in a bun and a soft voice that used to say, "Dad," when Jason introduced her to me. They married 3 years ago. She stood like she had been carved out of marble, tall, calm. Around her were her brother and a few women who hugged her and said, "I'm so sorry, and call me if you need anything." And then I saw it. She smiled. Not a quiet, sad smile. Not a gentle, broken smile that people sometimes give when they are trying to be brave. She looked at a man across the row of chairs. He was not one of our family. He wore a dark coat and had his hands in his pockets. He looked like someone who had been pulled to the cemetery by a news story or a random sadness on the street. He stood a little apart, like a stranger who wanted to be polite but not involved. Emily smiled at him. Not once, but twice. The way she lifted her chin, the way her mouth curved, it was a smile full of trouble and something else, something like secret sunshine. My breath stopped. Minutes later, I would later remember how short those minutes felt, like they had been squeezed by grief and time. I found out why she had smiled. I do not tell you the reason now. I will tell you the truth in time, but here, in this moment, I only say this. The smile cut into me like ice. It felt wrong in a room full of wrong things. It felt like a needle in a wound that had not yet closed. People sang softly. Someone dropped a tissue and did not pick it up. For the rest of the day, my thoughts became a quiet, dangerous thing. They crawled into corners and made lists. Did she know more? Was there something Jason had hidden? How could she smile? The word betrayal formed itself in my mouth and I spat it out like a bitter pill. The story of this day did not begin at the cemetery. It began months before, when Jason called me one night and said, "Dad, I need you." He did not say it in the boyish way he used to. He said it like a man who finally realized he needed help. Jason had been driving for a delivery company. He worked long hours. He was kind and careful. He was the sort of man who left a bad parking job a little early to help an old woman carry her groceries. But life had been heavy on him. His boss had cut his shifts. He owed money on a truck and a loan for a small repair shop he had tried to start. He and Emily kept the small apartment. They laughed sometimes over cheap pizza and late-night movies. He told me he had been late on rent. I remember the night he came to the house. He sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug. "Dad," he said, "I messed up." "How?" I asked. I wanted to say nothing would break him. I wanted to say the old wrench in the shed still worked and that we would fix it. Instead, I asked the practical question, because that is what I had always done. He told me about the money. He told me about the men who were patient and the men who were not. I could see he carried worry like a heavy coat. I told him to bring me the papers. I said we would go through it together. I felt a small, foolish hope that we could put plugs in the leaking roof of his life. A week later, my son was found on a back road, his truck overturned and burned. The police called it an accident. The funeral home wrapped him in a gray suit and combed his hair the way my wife used to when she was alive. My wife had not lived to see Jason become a man. She had died when he was 7. I had tried to be both father and mother after that, but there are things a husband cannot do for his boy. After the wreck, people came by the house with casseroles and sad faces. Emily sat quietly in the living room and let people talk to her. She said little. She only cried. She wore black for weeks. She moved in with my family as if the house had always been hers. She cleaned the kitchen and found the best way to fold napkins. She called me Mr. Hayes sometimes, and once called me Dad, and I felt like a man whose ribs had been pressed in the right place. But sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the TV showed nothing but blue light, I found small things that did not fit. A receipt for a coffee shop I knew nothing about. A lipstick stain on a scarf that was not mine. Once, I saw a small text pop on her phone while she thought people weren't looking. Can't wait. It was signed with a heart emoji. I told myself to breathe. I told myself children make mistakes. I told myself that grief teaches people strange things. Grief also teaches you to notice what you did not notice before. Neighbors came to the funeral. My brother stood beside me and put his large hand on my shoulder like a brace. Cousins came. People from church came and lined up like a small army of shared sorrow. I watched faces. I watched Emily's face most of all. At dinner after the funeral, she laughed at a story that did not seem very funny. She put her hand on the shoulder of a man named Tom from the church, and she rested her head on his arm for a moment. I told myself, again, that people needed comfort in different ways. Then, 2 weeks after the burial, I found a folded paper wedged under my porch mat. It was a note with words that made my whole body go cold. You should know, it read in shaky handwriting. She has been seeing someone. He's at the Maple Street Cafe every Tuesday. He came to the funeral. He smiled back at her. I did not go right away. The note had no name, only a scrawl and a coffee ring. I felt foolish following a coffee stain. But a father is stubborn in the way a tree is stubborn. Roots remember water. I remembered when Jason told me he needed help. I remembered the way he had smiled in that photo on my chest. The idea that Emily had betrayed him bit at me. I went to the cafe on Tuesday. It was a small place with mismatched chairs and a radio that played old songs. A man sat at a corner table, stirring his cup. He looked up as if he had been waiting. He wore a coat that looked like it had been new a few months ago. He glanced at his watch and then at the door, as if checking the time for someone he expected. Emily walked in. She smiled. She slid into the chair across from him. They talked. She laughed in a way that sounded the same as the smile at the cemetery. Quick, private, bright. They touched hands as if to practice holding each other. When he left, he kissed the back of her hand the way someone might kiss a small, secret prize. I watched until the sky grew darker. When she left, she did not see me. She walked down the street to the bus stop and got on with her head bent. The man watched her go and then looked at me with a smile that said, "Good job keeping watch." His face was not ugly. It was ordinary in a way that made ordinary things dangerous. I did not speak to Emily after that. I went home and sat on the porch until the stars came out. I felt a plan forming. It was ugly, like storm clouds that make thunder feel patient. I wanted answers and my chest wanted something else. It wanted justice. In the days that followed, people asked if I wanted to press the police. People said it was an accident. People said, let her grieve. People were kind in their way. They said that grief makes strange company, that people sometimes cling to others for warmth. But I had seen the way she smiled at a stranger in a cemetery while we buried my son. I had seen them at the cafe. I had the note with the coffee ring. My mind split into 2 jobs. One was to care for my son's small things, his jacket, his old baseball cap, the little toolbox he left in our garage. The other was to watch Emily. Watching someone is a tiring job. It makes you small. You notice tiny things, like the way a person breathes when they are nervous, or the way their phone buzzes and they hide it. I learned the times she left the house. I learned the names of the people she texted. I learned the shade of blue in the cups she favored at the grocery. This watching did not help my grief. It wrapped it in more threads. The more I watched, the more I felt the ground give under my feet. And then, one afternoon, a less extreme thing happened. My dog, Milo, who had belonged to Jason, found a small metal key in the yard. He dropped it at my feet, tail wagging. It was a small thing. Robert picking up the key felt like picking up a coin in a park. You cannot call it much. But that key had a number on it, 214. It was a locker key. I put the key in my pocket and forgot about it until the next day. I kept telling myself to breathe. I started to fix the roof of the garage to keep busy. I mended a broken shelf and hummed an old gospel song. In those moments, grief felt like a dull, steady ache instead of a sudden, sharp pain. Then one evening, when I was counting screws in the shed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the storage on Route 7. 8 p.m. Bring nothing. Come alone. I stared at it until the letters blurred. My first thought was that someone wanted to hurt me. My second thought was that perhaps this was what the note writer wanted, to pull me into a place where I could see the truth. I went that night. The storage place smelled like dust and old paper. A single light flickered in the hallway. I wore my old coat and kept my hands empty. My heart hammered like a trapped bird. A man, tall, peaked cap low, open locker, 214. He looked at me without surprise and without malice. On the floor of the unit sat a small box. He pushed it toward me and said in a low voice, for you. The box rattled like it had secrets. I don't want to tell you everything that was inside the box because truth tastes better when it is not spit out in a single swallow. But I will say this. It had things that connected the smile to something that did not belong at a funeral. Paper. A photograph. An item that smelled like perfume and gas. I felt the world tilt. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to hold the box like I could hold the pieces of Jason together. The man in the cap said, you should know. His voice was quiet and flat. She told me where to be. She told me what to say. She smiled at the funeral so I would look her way while she did what she had to do. The light above us hummed. I looked at the box again and thought of Jason laughing with a wrench in his hand. I thought of him asking for help that night. My mouth dried. My knees grew weak. For a moment, I could not believe what I had learned. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe the man was lying to get money or revenge. But the proof sat in that box, quiet and heavy. Why would she? I began. My voice cracked. The man did not answer. He only said, you will find out. You will find out in minutes. I thought, minutes. The same word I had heard at the cemetery. Minutes that stretch like a held breath. Minutes that can bend a life. I left the storage without the box. I walked back to my car with hands that trembled. My phone buzzed again. It was a photo sent from an unknown number. The image showed Emily and the man from the cafe. They were standing close in an alley laughing. But the photo showed more. Jason's truck in the background, its hood open, a gas can lying on the ground. My stomach dropped. I felt like the world had been turned inside out. I drove home slowly, the radio playing an old song about small-town living. When I opened the front door, the house smelled faintly of perfume and lemon cleaner. I swallowed and sat at the kitchen table. My hands folded into each other like two pieces of a puzzle. I thought of what revenge might mean. I thought of justice. I remembered what my mother used to say, son, when the world tries to make you bitter, make kindness instead your answer. It was a saying that sounded simple. It did not seem to apply to people who smiled at strangers during a funeral. At dinner that night, Emily came in late. She hummed like someone who was not burdened. She set down a small bag with food for herself and smiled at me in the way strangers do when they are trying to be polite and not let the room know everything they think. I put the photo on the table. I watched her face. It did not change at first. Then, slow as a tide, she looked down, then up, then away. Her hands trembled like they might drop the plate. She tried to hold a smile, and it felt painted on. No one in that room was able to breathe the same. Why did you smile at that man today? I asked. My voice was soft, but it felt like a bell. People in the next room stopped and stood still like statues. She looked at me. What do you mean? She said. I took the photo and pushed it toward her. The man from the cafe stood in the photo with a grin. Emily covered her mouth with the back of her hand, and for a second I thought she might cry. But then she laughed, a small, brittle sound I had not heard before. She said, "You can't believe everything you see." That laugh is a memory I wish I did not have. At that moment, my brother burst into the kitchen. He had been talking to the neighbors and had been told there was something going on. When he saw the picture, his eyes went wide. "Robert," he said, "we should call the police. This is—" Before he could finish, the front door opened and a woman I had never seen before walked in. She was tall and wore a black dress. She looked like she had been carved for a stage. She had a look that said she meant business and would not accept small talk. She held something in her hand. "Mr. Hayes," she said. "I'm Detective Laura Mills. We need to speak." Detective Mills took a deep breath and said, "We found new evidence. We need to ask you questions about Jason's accident." My heart hammered and my head filled with a noise like a train. I looked at Emily, then at the photo on the table, then at the detective. The room spun slow. For a moment, I felt tired enough to sleep on the kitchen table. It was then that my phone rang. It was a number I knew, the coroner's office. I answered with my voice small. The person on the other end said, "Mr. Hayes, there's been a development. We want you to come in." Minutes later, everything changed. I will stop here. The door to the garage had been left open a crack. When I stood to answer the phone, I caught a movement in the window. A shadow slipped across the lawn toward the back of the house. The porch light flicked and went off like someone had taken the bulb. I walked to the back door. The air smelled like rain that had not yet fallen. I reached for the handle and then, at the exact moment I touched it, a loud, sharp sound split the night, a car horn blaring, a shout, then glass breaking like ice. The kitchen window shattered. A shape flew through it and hit the linoleum with a thud. I heard Emily scream. Detective Mills shouted for someone to call backup. My brother pushed a chair to block the door. The world shrank to the sound of breaking glass, the smell of smoke, and the sight of a dark figure trying to crawl out from the mess on the floor. Something heavy hit my chest. I fell backward against the table. The photograph slid off the table and fluttered down like a fallen leaf. I could not see clearly. My ears rang. I clawed at the ground. Someone was on the floor near the window coughing. When he pushed the hair from his face, I saw him. It was the man from the cafe. He smiled. He smiled the same smile Emily had given him at the funeral. I tried to stand. My legs did not answer. The room felt very small. Detective Mills moved like a machine and bent down. "Search him," she ordered. "Find out who he is." They pulled his jacket aside and found a small packet in his pocket. He had a mark on his neck like a bruise. He looked at me with something like pity. He whispered, "You will know. You will know soon." The sirens in the distance grew louder. My brother yelled for someone to call 911. For a tiny, terrible second, I thought of the key in my pocket, the box in the storage locker, and the photograph. I had seen Emily smile at that man. Minutes later, I thought I would find out why. But at that exact moment, the man from the cafe looked up at me and smiled again, gentle, like a man who knows a secret he plans to sell to the world. And then he coughed, and the lights in the kitchen flickered and went out. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was his voice, soft and sure, "You never looked hard enough." The darkness swallowed sound. I lay on the cold floor and tried to breathe. My thoughts broke into little pieces. The house felt like a body with something wrong inside it. I thought of Jason. I thought of the maple tree. I thought of how a smile could be a small thing that kept a terrible plan together. Outside, the wind moved the leaves like hands wiping a slate clean. I will not tell you what I saw after the lights came back on. Not yet. Not until you ask me to continue. But I will tell you this. The night left me with a new kind of ache. It was the ache of a man who had looked at a stranger and learned that his life had been a story told only in part. It was the ache of someone who realized that even when you bury the ones you love, there are secrets that wait above ground. I folded my hands and sat on the kitchen floor as people moved around me like waves. Detective Mills called for backup. Someone put a blanket around Emily. My brother held my arm like a lifeline. Minutes later, just like at the cemetery, I would find out why she had smiled. But that, I promise, is a story for another time. For now, I will keep the secret burning like embers so that when it is time, the truth will be hot enough to change everything. The kitchen was full of sounds that did not belong together. The sirens grew closer like a drumroll. People murmured in low voices. Detective Mills moved fast and calm. She had a way of speaking that made the room feel smaller and safer. Her voice was short and steady. "Is anyone hurt?" she asked. Emily sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were wide and empty. Her hands shook. She looked at me like she could not believe the house still held her. The man from the cafe, who I still heard in my head as the stranger with the easy smile, coughing on the floor, blinked and looked around as if he had walked into the wrong movie. An officer knelt by him and asked his name. The man answered slowly. "Michael," he said. "Michael Reed." Detective Mills asked, "Did you come here alone?" Michael smiled, the same small smile. "No. I met someone here. She told me to come. She said you'd be here. She said she wanted the truth to be found." "Who told you to come?" the detective asked. Emily looked at the man as if she might know him. Her face had gone gray. "I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't tell him to come. I didn't." Her voice broke. She folded into herself the way a leaf folds when the wind is sharp. Someone handed her water. She drank without looking at the cup. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. Detective Mills walked to the window and looked out. She watched the yard like someone who reads weather in the way a line of clouds moves. She turned and said, "We are going to secure the house. We will need to check everything. Do not touch anything. Mr. Hayes, please stay where you are." My brother leaned down and hugged Emily. He held her like a man who held a child on a cold night. His arms were big and warm. She closed her eyes for a second and then opened them again to look at me. Her face was a mask of confusion and something else I couldn't name. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," but I could not tell if she meant sorry for what I thought or sorry for what had just happened. The paramedics came and took Michael to the ambulance. They said he had breathed in something that made his lungs burn. He was weak, but he would live. Before they carried him out, Detective Mills asked him one more thing. "Did Emily ask you to do anything? Did she tell you to go into the house?" Michael looked at Emily. He looked like a man who had been surprised by fire. "She told me to meet her at the church. She said she needed help moving something. She told me to wait outside and then come in when she told me. She said she'd be wearing a blue scarf. She said she'd smile at me so I'd see her. She said when she smiled at me at the funeral, it was a code. I thought she was lonely. I thought she needed a friend." Emily's hands clenched like she could squeeze the memory out of her. Her lips moved, but no sound came. I reached for her hand, and she let me take it for a moment. Her skin was warm. Her palm fit into mine like it had been made for it. Then she pulled back like someone who had been burned. Detective Mills put down a small notebook and asked me to tell everything I knew about the accident. I tried to say it all. I told her about the late-night calls, the men at the shop, the money Jason had owed. I told her about the truck and the loan. I told her about the night he had come to the kitchen and said, "Dad, I messed up." I told her about the gas can I saw in the photo and about the storage key that Milo found. I told her about the note tucked under the porch mat and the look the man gave me at the cafe. Detective Mills listened carefully. Her pen scratched paper like rain. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she asked, "Did Jason have enemies? Anyone who wanted to hurt him?" "I can't think of anyone," I said. "He was a good man. He helped old ladies." Did he borrow money from anyone dangerous?" she asked. I thought of the men who had pressured him, the ones who had been patient and the ones who had not. He had troubles, I admitted. He owed money. He was late on rent. He worried, but he loved his wife. Emily stood again and walked to the hallway. Her feet made quiet sounds on the floor. She opened a small door and went into Jason's old room. I followed her. The room still smelled faintly of him, a mix of motor oil, cheap cologne, and a scent I could not name. Emily sat on the edge of the bed and put her head down. She began to cry, and the sound broke me in a new place inside. I tried to comfort her, but every time I touched her shoulder I felt like I was touching a burning thing. She told me, between sobs, I didn't set him on fire. I didn't tell anyone to. Her words stopped as if someone had closed a door. She stared at her hands, and then looked up at me with eyes that spoke of a truth she did not fully understand. Detective Mills returned and said, "We need to talk about where Jason was the night he died. Did he meet anyone? Did he say where he was going?" I told her about the delivery routes. I told her about the repair shop he had tried to open. I told her about a man named Troy who had helped Jason with odd jobs and had once lent him money. She wrote down every name. She asked me if Jason's truck had any cameras or dash cams. I said no. I told her about Jason's habits. He liked to stop at the Maple Street gas station sometimes, and at a diner near his route where he sometimes ate breakfast alone. Was there any reason Emily might want to see Jason dead? Detective Mills asked gently. The question felt like a hand prying open a jar. I wanted to shout no. I wanted to say she loved him. But I also remembered the smile at the funeral, the texts, the cafe, the small things that did not fit. She loved him, I said. She loved him like a woman who is kind. But I do not know what people carry inside them. Detective Mills' eyes were steady. We will check everything, she said. Please, if you remember anything else, tell us. No matter how small. I nodded. I tried to breathe. Over the next 2 days, the house filled with people who wanted to help. Friends brought casseroles and cookies. People left flowers on the porch. The church group came to pray. Some neighbors offered to watch the house. The community moved around us like a warm cloak. I felt both comforted and suffocated. During the day, I kept thinking about the storage box in locker 214. I kept thinking about the key Milo had found. I had not opened the box that night at the storage because the man with the cap had told me to wait. Now I wanted to open it more than anything. I wanted to know the truth in the way a thirsty man wants to know where water hides. Detective Mills asked me to bring the box to the station. She said they would have someone open it with gloves and cameras. I agreed. I felt relief like a small bird returning to a safe branch. At the station, the evidence room was cold and quiet. A young officer named Harris took the box from me and put it on a table. He wore gloves and handled everything like it was made of glass. He opened the box with a small blade. Inside, everything was wrapped in brown paper like a bundle of memories. There were photographs. There were receipts. There was a small bottle that smelled faintly of perfume. There was a scrap of cloth. The photos showed Jason's truck from different angles. One showed the truck with the hood open and a person standing nearby. The person in the photograph had a hood over his head. I could not make out the face. Another photo showed a hand placing something near the truck. The hand looked familiar and ugly in a way that made my stomach twist. But the thing that made me stop was a short video on an old phone tucked into the corner. The phone's battery was low, but it still worked. Officer Harris played it on a small screen. The video showed a road at night. A truck rolled slowly into view. 2 men stood nearby. One pushed something under the truck. The other watched. The angle was shaky, like someone had hidden the camera. There was no sound, only the whisper of wind. I felt my throat close and my heart drop to the floor. In the dark light of the video, I saw a shadow that looked like a hand. The hand looked like it could belong to anyone. The camera shook and then was turned away. The video stopped. Detective Mills leaned over and said, "We will have this forensics team enhance the video. We will find out who those hands belong to." I wanted to say, "Find out fast." I wanted to scream at the sky. I wanted to tear the world open. But I did not. I nodded and put my hand to my face. Later that night, Emily came to my room. She knocked and then opened the door like a child stealing into a bedroom past curfew. She sat on the chair and folded her hands in her lap. Her hair was down and framing her tired face. "Robert," she said softly. "I didn't set him on fire. I didn't do this. I swear I didn't." "I know," I said. "But you smiled at that man at the funeral. Why?" She looked at me like I had asked a question about a place where thunder happens. "I smiled because I wanted someone to see me," she said. I felt so alone. When someone smiles back, it makes you feel like you are not invisible. The man smiled at me like he knew me. He said kind things. He told me about a job. He said he could help pay the bills. He said he could make things easier. I thought. Her voice broke. "You thought what?" I asked. She wiped her eyes and said, "I thought if I had someone who cared, maybe the worry would go away. I thought maybe Jason would get rest. I thought maybe I could stop being so afraid." Her hands trembled. "I never thought he'd be hurt. Did you know he was in danger?" I asked. "Did you know anything about the truck?" The gas? The men who came around. No, she whispered. I wish I knew. I wish. She stopped. No one answered. For a few days, the police worked through the pieces. They called witnesses. They examined the truck photos. They ran Jason's route and asked the diner and the gas station for any cameras. They found a man who had lent Jason money and interviewed him. The community helped in pieces like many hands weaving a blanket. One evening, a woman from the church named Karen brought us soup. She knelt down and looked me in the eye. Robert, she said, we all want justice. But remember to keep your heart soft. Jason wouldn't want hatred to live in his house. Her words were a kind song in a house full of harsh noises. I tried to keep my heart soft. I tried to let kindness guide me. But kindness was a fragile thing when the world kept making sharp edges. Then, a less extreme thing happened. I found a letter slipped under my car windshield. The handwriting was careful and steady. There was no name on it. It read, "Look under the maple. Find what you need." There was a single line under the message, "Trust no one." My hands shook as I walked to the maple tree. The ground at its base was soft from rain. I knelt and began to dig with my bare hands. It was cold and the soil smelled like earth and roots. I dug until my fingers hit something hard. It was a jar wrapped in plastic. Inside the jar was a small note and a key. The key looked like the one Milo had found. The note said, "Don't trust the smile. It hides a plan." I held the key and the jar, and my heart was full of a heavy, tricky feeling. I knew then that the story had more layers than I had thought. Someone had left the jar to help me. Someone had wanted the truth to come out. But who? The handwriting was not Emily's. It was not my brother's. It was neat and tidy, like a secret written by someone trained to hide. The next day, the detectives called me to the station. They had enhanced the video. The face on the screen had been blurred before, but now they could make out a shape. The face was young and had a scar near the eye. The detectives compared it to a list of people who had been near Jason the week before. One name stood out. "You know him?" Detective Mills asked. I looked at the screen and felt something cold run through me. The man on the screen had a face I had seen before. He had worked at the repair shop. He had done odd jobs for Jason. He had a grin like he was always saving something for later. "That's Troy," I said. "Troy Wilkes. He used to fix my son's truck sometimes. He knows where Jason keeps things." Detective Mills nodded. "We are bringing him in," she said. When Troy came to the station, he was tough in a way that made you think he grew up on streets with no safety nets. He looked at me and did not flinch. "I didn't kill him," he said immediately. "I would have helped him. I owed him." "Where were you the night of the accident?" Detective Mills asked. "I was fixing a car for my cousin," Troy said. "I didn't see Jason that night." The detectives asked him about the scar and the pictures. His voice got louder and then colder. He said, "I don't like being accused." I watched him. His jaw worked like a man chewing on something hard. I felt rage and fear push against each other inside me like two animals fighting in a small cage. Detective Mills said, "We will check the alibi. For now, please do not contact the family." Troy left with his head up like a man who had something to hide or something to fear. I watched him go. My hands gripped the bench until my knuckles shone white. That night, I could not sleep. I walked out into the yard. The moon was round and blank. The maple tree stood like a guard. I felt like I had been made small and given a task that was too big. I reached up and touched the bark. It felt warm from the day. I thought of the man who had smiled at my wife at the funeral. I thought of the jar under the maple. I thought of the note, "Trust no one." Then, the house light upstairs went out. At first I thought it was the storm rolling in. Then I heard a sound like a footstep on the porch. I froze. My heart pounded like a drum. Someone was outside the house. I could hear breathing. It sounded steady and slow. A shadow moved across the porch light. I turned and watched. My legs felt like jelly. I could reach the door if I ran. I could call Detective Mills. I could do many things. Instead, I did nothing. The shadow moved toward the back of the house. I heard a soft scraping sound. It was a sound like hands on wood. Then a louder sound, a thump, like something heavy being placed on the ground. My breath left my body. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I whispered my address and said there was someone outside. A voice on the other end said help was coming. I tried to be calm and my fingers shook. I waited. After a long minute, I heard a noise that pulled all the air from my body. It sounded like the scream of an animal and a man at the same time. It was a horrible sound that made me run. I rushed to the back door and flung it open. The yard was dark. The porch light had been smashed. In the middle of the lawn, something heavy lay on the grass. It was Jason's baseball bat. It lay across a small mound. The mound had fresh dirt on it. The top of the mound had a shape like a shoe pressed into the soil. It was new soil, like someone had recently disturbed the ground. My heart stopped. I ran to the mound and dug with my hands. The dirt was cold and wet. I pulled and pulled until my fingers touched wood. The soil crumbled away and I saw a small box. The box was nailed shut. On top of the box, there was a note with my name on it. My hands trembled as I pried the box open. Inside was a small stone and a piece of paper. The paper had one line, "You asked for the truth." This is only the beginning. At that moment, headlights lit the yard. A car drove up the street with its horn blaring. I turned and saw a dark van pull into my driveway. Doors slammed. Flashing lights painted the house red and blue. Someone banged on the back door and shouted, "Police. Open up." I stood with the box in my hands. I looked up to see who had arrived. Detective Mills ran toward me with an officer beside her. Her face was white but steady. She shouted, "Step away from the box." I raised the box like a small offering. My head throbbed. I felt like I had been walking through a dream that was now turning into a nightmare. Then, from behind me, a sound. A soft sound like someone whispering a name. Emily's voice, but strange and far. I turned. The back gate was open. Emily was not on the porch. She was not on the lawn. She was gone. Everything moved fast. The police swarmed. Detective Mills grabbed the box and held it up to a light. Officers split to search the yard and the house. My brother screamed Emily's name. I called out myself until my voice broke. No one saw her go. The back gate had been left open. The footsteps in the grass were wet and small. The jar under the maple felt like it had been a clue left to make us run in circles. I felt my knees fail. My hands dropped the box. It hit the grass and the lid flew open. The piece of paper fluttered away like a bird and landed under the porch. The stone lay in the box like a heart. Detective Mills looked at me with eyes that had turned hard. "We have to find her," she said. "If she left, we need to know where she went. If she didn't." Her words cut off like a gunshot. The night felt large and empty. I could not breathe. My mind raced with questions. Did she run? Had someone taken her? Had she been planning to leave? Was she hiding or being hidden? Who would do this? The same man who smiled? Troy? Michael? Someone else entirely? The police called for more units. They put a perimeter around the house. The neighbors came out with flashlights and concerned faces. The maple tree's leaves rustled like a whisper. The note in the box had said, "This is only the beginning." I did not know what that meant. I only knew one thing. In a few minutes, everything I had believed would be tested. In a few minutes, the truth would start to tear the house apart. For the first time since Jason died, I felt terrified not only for him, but for the woman who had smiled at a stranger at his funeral. The night held its breath. The police radios buzzed. The sky was a deep, hungry black. I stood on the wet grass and looked at the open gate and thought of the maple and the jar and the key. I thought of the man who had screamed that I had never looked hard enough. I thought of the words, "Trust no one." And I waited for the next thing to happen. The room felt colder that night. I couldn't tell if it was the air or the silence that made my skin crawl. After that moment at the burial, I couldn't shake the image of Lily smiling at that stranger. It replayed in my head every time I closed my eyes, that soft, secretive smile, like something only two people in the world understood. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Grief makes people act strange, I told myself. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she saw a friend. Maybe it was nothing. But something deep inside me, that same instinct that had kept my son safe as a boy, whispered that it was something. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the kitchen. It was early, barely past 6. I went downstairs, expecting to see Lily crying over old photos or cooking breakfast for the guests who were still staying over. But instead, she was dressed, too well dressed for someone who'd just buried her husband. A cream blouse tucked into dark jeans, hair tied neatly, makeup subtle but deliberate. Going somewhere? I asked. She jumped slightly, not expecting me to be up so early. Just stepping out for some air. Needed to clear my head. At 6 in the morning? Couldn't sleep, she said, smiling politely, then picked up her purse and walked out before I could say another word. I went to the window. A silver sedan was parked a few feet from the house. Not one I recognized. A man sat inside, head tilted down, wearing sunglasses even though the sun hadn't fully risen yet. When Lily opened the car door and slipped inside, something in me snapped. I grabbed my coat and quietly followed. The car drove toward the next town, slow at first, then faster. I stayed far behind in my own car, praying they wouldn't notice me. My hands were trembling. I didn't know what I was going to find, but part of me already knew. They stopped at a diner just off the highway. I watched from across the street as Lily got out, laughing, actually laughing, and the man stood up to hug her. A long, tight hug. Too tight for just friends. My heart clenched. That was my son's widow. My boy's wife. And she was holding another man before his grave had even settled. I sat there for almost an hour, frozen in disbelief. The man reached across the table a few times, touching her hand, brushing her hair away, that easy, intimate body language that only people deeply familiar with each other share. When they finally left, they didn't come home. They drove somewhere I couldn't see, a motel road off the highway. I stopped following after that. I didn't need proof anymore. That evening, when she returned, she looked calmer, almost peaceful. She didn't notice my stare. She just made herself tea and hummed a soft tune as she sat by the window, watching the sunset like nothing had happened. That night, I sat by my son's photo in the living room and whispered, "What did she do to you, Ethan? What didn't I see?" I needed to know more. And if there was one thing I knew about betrayal, it's that it always leaves crumbs. The next day, I started looking. I checked Ethan's old study, the one Lily never went into. Inside the desk drawer, I found a small envelope labeled insurance policy. My breath caught. I opened it. Ethan had named Lily as his sole beneficiary. The amount was life-changing. And then I noticed something else, a second envelope tucked beneath. A letter, dated just 2 months before his death. It was from Ethan to me. It said, "Mom, if anything ever happens to me, please don't trust easily. I've been feeling off lately, like I'm being watched, followed even. I don't want to sound paranoid, but something's not right. I'll explain soon, when I'm sure." My heart started pounding. I looked at the date again. 2 months before his death. He died in a car accident. The police said it was a blowout on the highway, nothing suspicious. But now, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I called Officer Daniels, a family friend who'd been on duty the day Ethan died. I asked him for the case details. He hesitated, then told me quietly, "Linda, I probably shouldn't say this, but there was something odd. The tire wasn't just blown, it was slashed. But since the car caught fire, there wasn't enough left to prove anything. We ruled it as a road hazard." I froze. Slashed. That word echoed in my mind again and again. That night, Lily was on the phone. I overheard her in the kitchen whispering, "Don't call me so soon. People will start asking questions. Just wait a few weeks." Then a pause. "Yes, I miss you too." I stepped closer, quietly, my heart thundering. She hung up quickly when she heard the floor creak. "Who is that?" I asked. "No one," she said. "Just a friend checking in." I forced a smile. "Good. You need all the comfort you can get." But inside, I was burning. Later that week, I went through Ethan's old phone, the one the police had returned to us. Most of it had been wiped clean after the crash. But one message was still there, in his drafts folder, never sent. It read, "If anything happens, look at her phone. Look at Daniel." My blood ran cold. Daniel. The same man I saw at the burial? The one she met at the diner? The puzzle pieces began to connect, and they formed something terrifying. But before I could dig further, something unexpected happened that shook me to my core. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You're looking in the wrong place, Linda. Stop asking questions before you end up like your son." My hands trembled as I read it again and again. Whoever sent it knew my name and what I was doing. The walls of the house suddenly felt like they were closing in. I locked every door, every window, and sat on the floor clutching Ethan's photo. But as much as fear gripped me, something stronger rose inside, something fiery, cold, and determined. If they thought I'd back down, they didn't know me. If they took my son, they'd pay. And I'd make sure of it. Because that night, I decided I was going to find out exactly who that man at the burial was, and what he had to do with my son's death. But the next morning, when I checked Lily's room, her bed was empty, and her suitcase was gone. She had disappeared. And on her nightstand, she left a small note. It said, "Don't come looking for me, Linda. You wouldn't understand." My blood ran cold. Because I would understand, and I was about to prove it. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the note Lily left, reading those words over and over again. "Don't come looking for me, Linda. You wouldn't understand." But I did understand. I understood enough to know that she was running from something, or someone. And if she thought she could just vanish after everything that had happened, she was wrong. By sunrise, I was dressed and ready. I packed a small bag, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight to her sister's house across town. Her sister, Megan, opened the door still in her robe, shocked to see me standing there. "Linda? Is everything okay?" she asked, her eyes red and puffy from sleep. "Has Lily been here?" I asked. Megan frowned. "No." "Why?" "She left in the middle of the night." Megan's eyes widened. "Again?" That word, "again," made my stomach twist. "What do you mean again?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "She did this once before. About a year ago." Ethan called me, panicking. Said she'd packed a bag and disappeared for 3 days. When she came back, she said she was at a retreat, but... I pressed. Megan lowered her voice. "She came back with a new phone. And a new necklace. One she refused to say who gave it to her." My chest tightened. Did Ethan believe her? Megan shook her head. "He wanted to. But he called me the night before she came home. He said something was wrong. Said he thought she was seeing someone else." That was all I needed to hear. I thanked Megan and left, my mind racing. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table, trying to think like my son would. If Lily was hiding, she wouldn't go far. She was too cautious. And that stranger, Daniel, he had to be the key. I opened Ethan's old laptop and searched through his email history. Most of it was work-related. But in one folder marked receipts, I noticed something strange. Hotel reservations, all under Lily's name, but paid for with Ethan's credit card. One of them stood out. Maplewood Inn, room 213, 2 nights. 1 week before Ethan's death. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. That same motel road I saw her drive toward with Daniel after the funeral. I printed the receipt, grabbed my keys, and drove straight there. The Maplewood Inn was a quiet, forgotten place on the outskirts of town. Faded red bricks, flickering neon sign, the kind of place people came to when they didn't want to be found. I walked in, heart pounding. The clerk behind the counter was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and an unbothered expression. I placed the receipt on the counter. "Hi. I'm trying to find out about the stay. It was booked under Lily Harrison." He looked at it, squinting. "That was a while ago. Room 213, huh?" He rubbed his chin. "Yeah, I remember her. Came in with a guy. Quiet, kept to themselves." My breath hitched. "Do you remember what the man looked like?" He shrugged. Tall, maybe mid-30s, brown hair. Had a scar near his chin. My chest tightened. The same man I saw at the burial. The clerk leaned closer. "Is something wrong?" "No, I lied. Just family business." I turned to leave, but he called after me. "Hey, she left something that night. Never came back for it." He reached under the counter and pulled out a small, faded notebook. "Found it under the bed after they checked out." I froze. "Can I see it?" He hesitated. if it helps get it back to her. I nodded quickly, took the notebook, and walked back to my car. The cover was worn. Inside were short notes, scribbles, and a name repeated over and over again in messy handwriting. Daniel. And underneath, in smaller writing, he said it's almost done. Once Ethan's gone, everything will be ours. My hands started to shake. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to breathe. So it was true. They had planned it. My son's death, his accident, wasn't an accident at all. The next page was even worse. A note written like a checklist. Tire slash done. Insurance signed. Meet at diner, confirm payment. Disappear until safe. My body went cold. Payment. For what? For killing my son? I closed the notebook and gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. That woman, the one I had welcomed into my family, the one I had comforted through tears, had murdered my son with the man she smiled at during his burial. And now she was gone. I sat there for a long time, shaking, the world spinning around me. Then something inside me hardened. They thought they could take everything from me and just vanish into the world. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I drove straight to the police station. I asked for Officer Daniels. When he came out, I placed the notebook on his desk. I need you to read this, I said, my voice trembling but firm. He looked through it, his eyes widening as he turned each page. Where did you get this? Maplewood Inn, I said. She left it there. Lily and the man she was having an affair with, Daniel. He closed the book slowly. Linda, this is serious. If this is real, it's not just an affair. It's conspiracy to commit murder. I know, I whispered. He rubbed his forehead. We'll need to verify this, but if it checks out, we can open a case. You might be called in for questioning. That's fine, I said. Just promise me one thing, find her. He nodded. But days passed. Then weeks. No sign of Lily. No trace of Daniel. It was like they'd vanished from the face of the earth. Until one morning, I got a call from a blocked number. When I answered, there was silence at first. Then a voice, cold, calm, and disturbingly familiar. Linda, the man said. I warned you to stop. It was him. Daniel. I froze. What do you want? I whispered. You should have left things alone, he said. Now, you've made things harder for everyone. Where's Lily? A pause. Then he laughed softly. She made her choice. What do you mean? But the line went dead. I sat there, phone shaking in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. Something terrible had happened, I could feel it. I was about to call Officer Daniels when I heard it, a knock on my door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. When I opened it, there was no one there. Only an envelope taped to the door. Inside was a single photograph, Lily, lying on a motel bed, eyes closed, pale, lifeless. And written on the back, in bold black ink. This is what happens when people talk too much. I dropped the photo, my knees giving out beneath me. My breath came in short gasps. Was she really dead? Had Daniel killed her too? As I sat there trembling, one thought burned through the fear. If they killed her, it meant one thing. Lily had turned on him. And maybe, just maybe, she left something behind that could destroy him too. That was the night I decided. I was going to finish what my son started. I was going to find Daniel. And I was going to make sure he paid for everything. But I had no idea that before I could, he'd already found me. That night, I locked every door in the house. I shut every curtain, left the lights on, and sat with my back against the wall clutching the photograph. My body trembled, but not just from fear, from fury. Daniel had killed my son. And now, maybe Lily too. But what he didn't know is that he'd just lit a fire inside me. I wasn't going to be his next victim. I called Officer Daniels right away and told him everything about the phone call, the envelope, the photo. He sent 2 officers to my house within minutes. They took the photograph for evidence and promised to trace the fingerprints on the envelope. Linda, Officer Daniels said over the phone, his voice steady but serious, you need to be careful. Whoever this Daniel is, he's dangerous. He's watching you. I know, I whispered, but I won't hide. For the next few days, I barely left the house. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow made me look twice. I could feel eyes on me even when I was alone. Then, on the fourth day, I noticed something strange. A black SUV parked across the street. It had been there since morning. Engine off. Windows tinted. I watched it from behind the curtain for nearly an hour. No one got out. I called Officer Daniels again. There's a car outside. I think someone's watching me. He said he'd send a patrol. But before they arrived, the SUV drove off, slow and steady, disappearing into the distance. That night, I found something under my front door. A single sheet of paper. It said, "You should have stopped when you had the chance. Next time, it'll be your turn." My hand shook. My knees felt weak. But right beside that note was something else, a small flash drive. No message. No label. Just a black flash drive. I stared at it for a long time before plugging it into my laptop. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely hear myself think. There was one video file, titled simply, "The Truth." I clicked it. At first, all I saw was static. Then, slowly, an image appeared, grainy, low-quality security footage. A motel parking lot. The timestamp read, "The night before Ethan's death." I leaned closer as the footage continued. A car pulled into view, Ethan's car. He parked, got out, and walked toward a door. Lily was standing there, arguing with him. Even though there was no sound, I could see her shouting, her arms waving wildly. Ethan looked furious. He turned to leave, but then another man appeared from the shadows. Daniel. He walked up behind Ethan, holding something shiny. A knife. He slashed Ethan's back tire. I covered my mouth, tears welling in my eyes. Ethan turned around just as Daniel disappeared into the dark. Lily stood frozen, panicked, then ran after Ethan, pretending to be shocked. And that was it. The video ended. My son never even knew. He drove off thinking it was just a bad night, not realizing his death had already been sealed. I sobbed quietly, clutching the laptop. My baby boy. And then I realized something. If Daniel sent me this, why? He wouldn't expose himself. He wasn't that stupid. Unless someone else had sent it. Someone who wanted me to see the truth. Maybe Lily. Maybe before she died, she recorded everything. Maybe she left evidence behind. I rewound the video, watching the corners of the screen carefully. And that's when I saw it, a faint reflection on the motel window. A third person filming. Not Daniel. Not Lily. Someone else. My heart pounded faster. Could someone else have been involved? I emailed the video to Officer Daniels and told him what I saw. He promised to analyze it. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every gust of wind against the window sounded like footsteps. Around midnight, I heard something downstairs. A soft click. Like a door unlocking. I froze. Then a slow creak. Someone was inside. I reached for the phone, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. I dialed 911, whispering into the receiver. "Someone's in my house." "Stay on the line, ma'am," the dispatcher said calmly. But before I could respond, the power went out. The house went completely dark. My heart raced. I could hear footsteps now, slow, careful ones, moving across the living room floor. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal candle holder, and crouched behind the door. The footsteps grew closer. Then a voice, deep, calm, almost mocking, whispered, "Linda, why couldn't you just leave it alone?" Daniel. He was inside. I held my breath, gripping the candle holder so tightly my fingers hurt. He stepped into the hallway, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam across the walls. "You could have just grieved quietly," he said softly. "But no, you had to dig." I could see his silhouette now, tall, broad shoulders, moving slowly toward the stairs. Step. 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 My pulse pounded in my ears. When he reached the bottom step, I swung. The metal candle holder hit his arm, and he shouted in pain. I ran, barefoot, heart racing, out the back door and into the yard. "Linda," he yelled, his voice echoing through the night. "You can't hide forever." I didn't stop. I ran straight to my neighbor's house and pounded on their door until they opened it. The police arrived minutes later. By then, Daniel was gone. Vanished. Again. Officer Daniels showed up soon after, his face grave. We'll find him, he said. We'll check the video, trace the flash drive, everything. He can't hide forever. But his words didn't comfort me. Not anymore. Because that night, when I returned home with the officers to gather my things, I saw something on my living room wall written in red paint. Just 3 words. He deserved it. My knees nearly buckled. I couldn't breathe. Officer Daniels grabbed my shoulder. Linda, look at me. We're going to protect you. But I couldn't hear him anymore. My eyes were locked on those words. My son had been murdered. Lily was dead. And now the man responsible was loose and taunting me. But he made one mistake. He thought fear would stop me. He didn't realize it would only make me more dangerous. Because from that night on, I stopped being the grieving mother. I became the hunter. And Daniel? He was about to learn that revenge from a mother who's lost everything is the kind of fire you can't put out. 3 days passed since the break-in, and I hadn't slept for more than an hour at a time. The police had installed extra locks and cameras, but I knew it wouldn't stop him. Men like Daniel don't quit. They wait. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the mug of untouched coffee in front of me. The walls felt too quiet, like they were listening. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. A message. You think you know everything. Meet me at the place where it ended. Come alone. No name. No timestamp other than now. I reread it a dozen times. The place where it ended. The crash site. Every cell in my body screamed no. But a smaller, colder voice inside whispered go. I printed out the message, left it on the table for Officer Daniels, and drove off before my fear could talk me out of it. The road to the crash site hadn't changed much. The trees leaned in the same way, the guardrails still twisted from impact. Someone had left wilted flowers there long ago, now they were brown and brittle. I parked a few meters away and stepped out. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Daniel. I shouted into the stillness. If you want me, I'm here. Nothing. Just the soft hiss of the wind through the trees. Then I heard it, footsteps crunching gravel behind me. I turned. A man stepped out of the shadows. But it wasn't Daniel. It was Officer Daniels. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice shaking. He raised his hands slightly. Linda, you weren't supposed to come here alone. We traced the flash drive. It was mailed from this area. We think he's close. My pulse slowed just a little. You scared me half to death. He nodded. I know. But listen. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes flicking past me. Get down, he shouted. A gunshot cracked through the trees. Bark exploded from the trunk next to my head. We both ducked. Run, he yelled, drawing his weapon. I scrambled toward the ditch while another shot rang out. Then silence. I crouched low, heart hammering, listening for movement. Leaves rustled somewhere to my right. When I looked up, I saw him. Daniel. He stepped into view, gun in hand, expression eerily calm. Linda, he said softly, like we were old friends. You should have stayed home. I rose slowly, my voice trembling with anger more than fear. You killed my son. He tilted his head. Your son killed himself. I just helped him understand what he'd done. What he'd done? I repeated. What are you talking about? He smiled faintly, almost sadly. You really didn't know, did you? Before I could answer, Officer Daniels emerged from behind a tree, weapon aimed. Drop it, Daniel. Daniel didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Ask her about Ethan's business. About the money. Don't listen to him, Officer Daniels warned. He's trying to confuse you. But Daniel just chuckled. Your perfect little boy wasn't innocent. He stole from the wrong people. And when I tried to fix it, he ran. I didn't kill him, Linda. The men he owed did. My breath caught. You're lying. Am I? His smile widened. Check his bank records. You'll see. Then, before Daniels could move, Daniel raised the gun toward himself. Stop. I screamed. A single shot echoed through the trees. He collapsed. Officer Daniels rushed forward, kicking the gun away, checking for a pulse. Nothing. I stood frozen, staring at the man who'd haunted my nightmares. He was finally gone. But the horror didn't lift. Because his words kept echoing in my head, check his bank records. 2 days later, Officer Daniels brought me a folder. We did what he said, he told me quietly. And he wasn't lying. Inside were copies of Ethan's accounts, large withdrawals, offshore transfers, names I didn't recognize. Ethan was being blackmailed, he said. We think Daniel was involved, but there were others. That's why he kept following you. Someone wanted to make sure the secret stayed buried. I felt sick. My son, my sweet, kind Ethan, caught up in something dark I never saw coming. I looked up at Daniels. So what now? We keep digging, he said. And if there's more, we'll find it. I nodded slowly. No, I whispered. I'll find it. Because I had one last message from that flash drive, hidden deep in the files, a second video I hadn't opened yet. Its title was just one word. Lily. And I had a feeling whatever was on it would change everything again.